It's been an action-packed week in the Canadian real estate market.
Yes, it has. Welcome to the Canadian Real Estate Show. Here we're going to talk about all sorts of different topics related to the Canadian real estate economy and markets, mainly focused on Toronto, but we like to really spread out and cover any news stories across the country.
Yeah, we like to pretend like we know about the overall economy here in Canada, but we really just know, pockets of Toronto. But this is the Canadian Real Estate Show. So here we are. We got lots and lots of news for you this week, don't we, TK?
Yeah, and we may even have a couple guests to join us at the end of the show. So let's first start by looking at what's going on today in the local Toronto real estate market. January was a very busy month for realtors. We had a lot of activity. We had a lot of buyers out there who were competing for homes. But what do you think prices have been doing, Darryl?
It's interesting that you asked me that, TK, because I feel like you're trying to trick me. But based on what I've seen, I feel like, prices are fairly stable at the moment.
Well, so far we haven't seen what the Toronto Real Estate Board's January numbers for 2024 have been, but we are expecting to see a small rise in prices based on the activity that we've seen and the lack of inventory.
The charts I've seen that have been compiled on Twitter show actually a small dip in prices, but so negligible that it really shouldn't matter.
One of the things about statistics is they can be easily manipulated. So you always have to be questioning the source of those statistics and exactly what type of measurements they were making. But so far, based on anecdotal tales of competing offers and prices compared to some of the last sales in those particular neighborhoods, we have seen some pressure on prices. And again, it's as a result of an increase in demand and a lack of supply.
There definitely seems to be a strong demand out there right now. We saw a story of a semi-detached home in Mississauga this week that had 85 offers.
That's 84 disappointed people, Darryl.
That's true, TK. 84 disappointed people. Can we blame the realtors for this one, TK?
I would most likely say yes in this case, because 85 offers seems to be a little bit unnecessary. Were the marketing methods and pricing strategies that were selected by the listing agent necessary to achieve that goal? Could the listing agent have achieved that price or even better with a different type of marketing or pricing strategy? Could that agent have saved the time of 84 disappointed buyers if a different marketing strategy and pricing strategy had been employed? What do you think, Darryl?
I think that a lot of the buying agents should have probably just pushed this one aside and considered it out of reach for their client's budget, knowing the market the way that they should. And having access.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Joe.
That's okay. We'll give you the first strike.
My apologies.
If you're any good at your job as a realtor, from my perspective, you would know what that price should fetch, regardless of the amount of offers involved. And if you go into it with the right information, most of those people just should have looked the other way.
Have you heard any stories lately about a seller who might be struggling to make their payments because of the increase to their interest rates month over month from a variable rate, or because they've renewed in the last 18 months their previous fixed rate? Have you heard of those situations, Darryl?
I have heard of that a few times. I feel like that story is dying out a little bit, but obviously there are some rotten eggs in this bunch.
If you're listening to this podcast right now from the comfort of your own living room, we suggest that you hit the subscribe button, like the video, and leave a comment if you have anything to say.
We really hope that you learned something from this video. And if you do, please pass the message along so that more and more people can learn from us as you have today.
And so what happens is buyers have this belief that they are going to be the lucky ones to buy a property for what is no doubtedly, undoubtedly characterized as under market value, right? And so when somebody decides to make an offer on a property that's listed for 750, even though the sales of that property in the neighborhood or similar property types are over $1 million, and that same property sold for close to the asking price over 5 years ago, what buyers believe is maybe this is the one where the seller is going to let me have it for less than what they could get for it. And perhaps the delusion of the 84 disappointed buyers was far greater than the capacity of their realtor to convince them that making an offer was a bad idea.
Well, you can't get it if you don't try. That's the lesson here, right?
Wayne Gretzky credited his father, Walter, with saying, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, kid."
That's
And I
right.
believe that could not be more true than for those 84 disappointed buyers who, unfortunately, this week spent their time, energy, and agents' gas money on making an offer on that property in Mississauga.
What a great Canadian reference you made there with Wayne Gretzky, eh?
Thanks, Darryl.
Well done, TK.
So, what else is happening right now in the current market of the Toronto real estate or Canadian real estate markets, for that matter?
It seems that there isn't only demand in the buying market. It seems like there's a over demand in the rental market as well. And not only any rental market. It seems to be that there's a lot of people just looking for a section of floor in the city right now. And we have a major story that broke this week of 25 immigrant students living in one basement in Brampton.
Now, before we start commenting on this news story, and anybody believes that maybe we're not sensitive enough to their situation, we are just bringing attention to it. So hopefully that there becomes a solution that we can offer these international students. But I'll give you an anecdotal story that I actually heard last night. I've listed a condo for sale that is going to be coming on the market at the end of this week, February 8th. And it's in Scarborough. And the owner is of Indian descent. You know, he's a Canadian. He's been here many years, but he's got a lot of connections in the Indian community. And he says he was offered the last time that he was renting out his condo about a year ago from somebody that he knew an opportunity to strike gold by renting out his 1+ den condo with 2 washrooms. The den is suitable for a queen size mattress and could be characterized as a second bedroom. And he was offered from one of his community brethrens to house 8 international students, and that he would be paid a premium where he was only able to rent conservatively $2,200 a month in a long-term rental situation to a couple, a young professional couple that he has currently in the unit, or 8 international students who would be willing to pay him cash $3,500. And I'd just like to share that with you, Joe.
If I put on my investor hat, TK, that sounds fantastic because my return on investment would soar through the sky to the moon, as we like to say. But I feel like my guilt would not be able to handle the living conditions I'd have to provide in order to achieve those profits. But it seems like there are many, many landlords who have no issue with this at all. Actually, it seems like if we do the math, can you imagine what the total is if you have 25 tenants in your basement that is really just supposed to be for one? Can you imagine what the boost to the pro forma would be on a monthly basis?
Now, there is something else that we need to take into consideration, which this client um, believes that he avoided any future issues by rejecting the offer from the international students um, liaison and decided to go with a young professional couple who make six figures and have professional jobs here, but they were new to Canada as well. And what he said is there would be potentially an increase of $15,000 a year uh, gross income on the property, but there would be a strain on some of the utility costs. So he did realize that that would be something that he would have to absorb in that pro forma. But he also said that most likely having 8 students living in that condo that was designed for 2 people, that was newly constructed only within the last few years, so perhaps has substandard building materials. He believes that he would have to then later on incur a future cost on the capital repairs, i.e., flooring, kitchen, bathrooms, fixtures, paint, walls, doornails, door handles, and any other potential damages that the tenants may cause. And so he decided that the ends didn't justify the means, and that, like the old adage, which is very true, if it's too good to be true, it most likely is.
It sounds to me like the next Airbnb. And what was the real issue with Airbnb is that it just didn't end up being sustainable. And so while it seems like the good times are rolling, if you are a slumlord in Brampton right now, it seems like the party is over because there is new legislation that could be on, could be off at the moment. It's unclear currently, but it seems like they've put a licensing process in place in order to combat the level of separation going on with units in buildings or homes at the moment.
The North Oshawa community also has special licensing near the University of Ontario and Durham College. And what's happened since that licensing has been put in place is the units in those areas have been legalized, they have been controlled. The amount of illegal units has decreased, and that there has been protections given to tenants in that area that is quite noticeable over the last 10 years, roughly, maybe less. And probably 10 years at least now. Now, when you look at what that does, though, is it actually removes rental units from the areas that need them the most. Now, what is more important, safety or supply? And so that is one of the questions. And I believe the city of Toronto, one of the dilemmas that they face is that if they over-regulated basement apartments, it would seriously exacerbate the supply problem on cheap rentals and affordable rentals. And that's something that they know is going to be a problem. And I believe that Brampton, the mayor Patrick Brown, would also be well aware of this and therefore decided to only regulate a small area as opposed to the entire city of Brampton, because we are in a housing crisis. Whether they are legal suites or not, we need as many places for people to live as possible.
And of course, it's the people that are doing everything by the book right now that are out in the streets protesting the decision to turn this zone into a licensed zone for landlords, because generally they're just asking people to follow the current rules. It seems to me that you have the legal amount of people in the legal amount of spaces in the building or the home. So um, it seems like we have a real conundrum here, don't we?
We definitely still have a housing supply issue. And so one of the things that we talked about on our live stream this week on the Clips channel. And if you've noticed, we have changed the way that we are presenting this news today in this episode. But what we would like people to know is that these issues will not be solved through simply a licensing of apartments in the Brampton area. This will not be something that is solved through media attention, because we've had media attention on foreign students. The University of Toronto Scarborough campus has had many illegal rooming houses, which we have now uh, in 2023 been able to increase the area which legal rooming houses can be permitted. But international students have been part of the storyline for many years now on the substandard living accommodations that we've been giving them, and that the people who are taking advantage of that situation not only are trying to profit from the supply issue, but also putting the students at risk. And yet the government doesn't seem to have any real solutions on creating more supply. The only options that they've come out with as of yet is, well, maybe we should stop letting so many international students in. What do you think about that, Darryl?
I think, as usual, the government is aiming for the wrong part of the problem, and they will likely not fix anything by slowing the amount of students that come into this country. I think we're still going to have, even with the slowdown, record amounts. Well, maybe not records compared to the last couple of years, but still ridiculous amounts compared to historic averages when it comes to immigration. And so, if you add that on top of an already strained system that's already doing crazy things, it can't help the situation from my perspective. Now, what's also interesting as part of this whole story is that we'll talk about a housing crisis and a shortage of inventory, but in the news right now, we see articles about builders and developers having more inventory than ever right now, and people are just not buying the excess inventory off of them, or it's moving extraordinarily slowly. And just a little caveat before I hand it over to you, TK. The Toronto sales process for pre-construction has been abnormal against the world stage for a very long time. And to sell out an entire building of 400 or 500 units in a weekend or in a week or in a month is absolutely insane and unheard of anywhere else on the planet. So what's probably really happening is we're getting to a realistic amount of inventory and a realistic length of sales time as part of the process moving forward. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think there is some truth to what it is that you're saying, Darryl. I think that your point is very valid and succinct. But what I'd like to point out, though, is that a lot of the pre-construction pricing that has been absorbed by buyers over the last couple of years has been inflated due to rising costs of construction, as well as cheap debt, but also due to the rising cost of land and basically government interference through taxes, levies, development charges, HST, so on and so on. And so I believe that buyers now, looking at the performance of their pre-construction investments over the last couple years, have decided, well, maybe this isn't the type of investment that's going to be best suited for me and my grandmother's line of credit. Now, when I was speaking to a client recently who bought a property in 2013, and this was the case back then, he reminded me, and I thought long and hard about it. And he said, we lined up at the developer's office, which was, in another part of the city, not at the location that the building was going to be built. And we were amongst the first 100 people who were in that line to get free parking and an opportunity to select the unit of our choice. And those type of methods were being used at a time when the pre-construction pricing and resale pricing of that day were much more in line with each other. And so as cost increased, the pre-construction market changed from developers launching their own projects without the aid of a cooperating brokerage and the buyer agency that we have today. And they were able to sell projects in the same fashion for similar profits, and seem to be quite satisfied. And so once the agents get involved, and there has to be a compensation for the representation of that buyer agent in order to be able to sell your product, that's when maybe these have been sort of a hard sell. and that it wasn't about it being a good investment or not, but it was just a well-oiled sales tactic that led a lot of people down a road that they most likely regret.
It's interesting that you say that, because that definitely has to be part of the puzzle. But I think what we have left over in inventory are units that are larger, that maybe people want, but they can't afford. So what happens in the process with development is the city mandates that you have a certain amount of larger units, and they need you to have a certain amount of 3-bedroom units, and they need you to have a certain amount of 2-bedroom units. And in order for the performa to work on paper, you need to sell these units at a certain price per square foot. And as the size of the unit increases, the cost, or the price per square foot, does not decrease. It stays at least the same, or at least you want it to from the sales perspective. And what happens is you end up with a bunch of inventory that you have to wait longer on to sell for the price you need to get in order for your project to not underperform for your investors. And so we get caught in this trap of, yes, we're building stuff. And yes, in the certain environment where everything is right and money is flowing, and people have buyers willing to buy anything, the system can work. But I think what we're finding as part of this process is that people can't afford 2-3 bedrooms in downtown Toronto for $2.5 million in a basic normal building.
One of the obstacles that we've been facing, and all your points are well received, I believe, by the public, because there is some responsibility that the government needs to have here. It's not the developer's fault for them not being able to provide affordable housing. I mean, if we've got 31% of a new construction home going to some form of government tax or levy, that means that you've got a significant amount of the project that is going to be required to be increased in price in order to be able to cover those costs. And so when we're looking at in the past where development charges and taxes were when developers were selling their own units, how much has changed over time? I'd like to see a chart on that, what the percentage has changed over the last 10 years. But more importantly is the government right now has been relying on individual investors to buy these condos, putting their money at risk, putting their um, credit and their lives, at risk again in order to be able to construct these units, where at the same time they haven't been willing to make the concessions. So we have seen now the HST portion of purpose-built rentals be removed both from the federal and provincial government. But what's necessary in order, because the land cost doesn't seem to be something we're able to decrease as much as anybody would hope for. The density is something, so what can be built on that land is something that I believe all level of governments are working very hard on right now. And I think we've seen some amazing changes there. But the cost of construction and land costs being two major factors are not able to be changed by the government really much at all. And so in order to influence more construction, we shouldn't have as many condos. We should have more purpose-built rentals. We should have less government tax. So therefore the percentage of the sale price or the percentage of the construction cost, overall cost to build that purpose-built rental will be far less than what it is right now. And some tax advantages for large multinational or Canadian corporations who want to add residential real estate into their portfolio. Some very large tax incentives in order for them to say, you know what, even if this doesn't make me money on the construction side of the project, it's going to benefit my business in other ways. And these are the things that I believe are going to be more impactful than Patrick Brown's licensing of basement apartments in Brampton.
Well, and having said that, we have Mr. Sam Mizrahi in the news again, who seems to be getting foreclosed on another site. And so I think from my perspective, what I've noticed is there seems to be this split in the supply that's able to be brought to the market, because really everything is luxury. If you look at any brochure for any rental, whether it's purpose-built rental or any condo, if it's being sold, every building right now is called luxury. So what is actually luxury is being muddied out there in the market. But what we're really seeing, at least from a cost perspective, is you can either build something really cheap to be somewhat affordable to qualify for everything you need to qualify for to get the financing you need to get in order to be able to build a purpose-built rental. And that thing's not going to look pretty, that's for sure, in order for it to make any money at any point in time. Um, but we have an unwillingness for these people that are even trying to build to even start building now, because look, people are going bankrupt because of other factors like construction costs, which are actually going down, but other costs like interest rates have just killed a lot of projects. So when you have what you have right now is people doing either super cheap to qualify for that really super cheap financing and do things that way, or people are going super high end, super expensive, super real luxury, and that middle is going to disappear. And then a developer nowadays, you have to be either really well um, capitalized, or people are dropping like flies. And we see a lot of foreclosed on sites right now that are zoned or almost zoned coming across our desk.
Well, the current state of pre-construction condos with the oversupply that they're in right now, I imagine that some of the developers' plans were to be launching sales in 2023, 2024, and those plans weren't realized. And so when you're looking overall at, the picture of the economy and interest rates and consumer confidence, it looks like we're going to be in this situation for a lot longer than people had expected. And more than anybody else would know, adding 24 to 36 months onto your timeline on some of these projects no longer makes them feasible.
Well, and generally, when you're coming to the decision of should we launch now or should we wait, and you're weighing those costs, it's likely on top of a decision you've already not been able to make, where you've paid all this extra interest for all this extra time dealing with things that are, just typical for development in the city of Toronto. Everything just takes longer than anticipated or longer than it should, regardless of what's going on. So you have this additional already that you hopefully put in the pro forma as some kind of cushion, but now your cushion is probably eaten up, and now you decide, should we wait? Is the market going to be better? Is it worth it? Is it worth the cost, or should we just launch now? And so I have to think that most people that are launching now have a couple of agendas. One, they have to, because they're being squeezed by a lender. They have no choice. They have to move. They're not capitalized well enough to hang on or do what they need to do. Two, they need to keep the wheels moving because they're a big machine and they just need a project to keep all the good staff on board during a slow period. So they'll just take one for the team. Or three, they're trying to eat up market share in an area and put some other builder out of business, or destroy their deal, maybe eat them up for breakfast after they go out of business. Otherwise, I don't know why anybody would be selling right now, because it's not a good time to launch anything, but it's a
There
tough
is good news.
decision. Yeah.
There is good news, though. This week, Olivia Chow did announce that instead of the 10.5% property tax increase, it's only going to be 9.5%,
Wow.
due to the federal government providing $143 million towards the fight to keep refugees housed in Toronto. Now, I'm no expert on refugees. Neither am I an expert on municipal budgeting. But I've seen the government spend money before, and I know exactly how far $143 million goes. And I can tell you with certainty that that does not go very far. And so what I had expected from the beginning was the municipal government to announce a higher tax increase. So that way, when they did finally make their decision at a little bit of a smaller number, everyone said, okay, it's not just 10.5, it's only 9.5. Therefore, I think she's doing a pretty good job. And in order to be able to garner more votes, which seems to be very Olivia Chow-esque, she is targeting renters again and said, how can I help renters in this struggling economy for them to pay lower? They're not paying property taxes. What can I do to make them happy? I'm already giving them as many programs as I can. I know. I am going to decrease the property tax mill rate on multi-residential properties. So therefore, their landlords will pass the savings along to them, even though there's rent control in most of those buildings, and that they're going to be increasing it to the max of 2.5% anyways. But thank you, Olivia Chow. We thank you.
Everyone thanks you, Olivia Chow. And you know who really takes the brunt of all of this? It's really the immigrants that come in that are struggling, that are trying to make their life here in Canada. And one of the perks of being the host of this wonderful show, the Canadian Real Estate Show, is that from time to time, somebody reaches out or calls me or calls TK. And so this week I got a call from somebody and we were just talking, and we were talking about when he immigrated to the country back in the early 2000s. And he was giving me the numbers of what it cost his family in order for him to come here and get his education. And what struck me was that if I took the number that he paid and I added inflation to it, I'm pretty sure, and maybe I did my math wrong because that tends to happen from time to time, but I'm pretty sure that it was even more expensive for immigrants to come here and go to school back then. So here's our friend, TK. This is Navraj, right? Did I say it right? Navraj.
Hi, yeah.
Well, welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Great
Thanks
to
for
be
being
here.
here.
I'm a long time watcher.
A long time
Well,
watcher, TK.
don't be
See that?
nervous. We're just two regular guys in black and
suits.
white suits and ties trying
That's right.
to
I missed the
be as
memo.
professional. Trying to be as
I mi-
professional as we can today
As
for you.
serious and professional for our followers as we possibly could be, because people want to hear the truth from us for some reason, TK. And people come here to learn, and we've been clowning around and we feel really bad about it. So we brought you on to get into some serious topic, and that's immigrating to this what used to be wonderful country that now is kind of suspect depending on your perspective. But what I was telling TK is that you guys, I don't know if we can share the numbers, but you guys spent a bloody fortune for you to come to school here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm transparent, so I will share my numbers with you. I moved to this country about 8 years ago. I did bachelor's in engineering from University of Waterloo. When I started, I think the tuition for a term was 20,000 a term, so that's 4 months, 20,000. By the end of it, because they have annual raises on the tuition fee, I think by the last term I was paying close to 25,000. And now it's probably even more. It's probably like 35,000 range for bachelor's in engineering, at least. But it depends on the school. The diploma mills, they will not charge as much, right? So it depends totally on where you're going for school here.
So my degree from the Athabasca University in Alberta, do you think that the price has gone up from $750 that I paid in 2005?
Surely. I would
Just checking.
guess like, yeah,
Maybe a slight increase.
maybe a slight increase.
Slight increase. So you're a smart guy. I mean, that's a great program. How does somebody from anywhere in the world come to Canada and pay for that cost? And actually, University of Toronto is much more than that this year.
Yeah,
right?
I think Toronto is even more. Back in the day, I was comparing where I should go, Waterloo or Toronto. I had offers from both, and decided to go with Waterloo because it had a better engineering program, and the fees was also a bit lower. As there's like there's a 5-10% difference at least. But yeah, it's difficult. 25,000 every 4 months is a lot of money. Thankfully, at the University of Waterloo, they have a co-op program, so you can do internships as part of your educational program. So every 4 months, you're you have an opportunity to do an internship and, make some decent money if you can find good jobs or internships, and that would help pay for the tuition. I paid my own tuition. My parents helped me initially, but I was lucky enough. But it's difficult. I mean, if you want to come to Canada for a good program, it's impossible if you don't have the funds. But if you want to come to a diploma mill, I think it's different. I think maybe for diploma mills, the fees probably 5,000, 10,000. I'm not even sure, but they're opening schools and strip malls. They're just not providing valuable education. But if you want valuable education, if you want the Canadian education that people aspire to, get ready to pay a lot of money.
So are people coming here for the education, or are people coming here because they don't want to live there?
I think it's the latter for the people I've mostly interacted with, but depends person to person, right? For example, for me, I came for the education. I thought there was better education here, and I do not regret the decision. I think I did get good education, but doesn't mean like if you're bringing 1 million people in a year, 1 million students in a year, maybe like 100K of them are coming in for quality education. The rest probably just want to get a permanent residency and just move here because they think the lifestyle is better here, and they would have a better living situation, even though that's not even true anymore. But I think they're getting the message now. I think people have stopped thinking of Canada as this great place to immigrate to. I feel that there's been a huge shift in the last few years.
How do you feel personally now after 8 years?
I sometimes I listen to like a few podcasts and people mention that they have changed. They've seen Canada change in last decades. Right? I can tell you, I've seen a change in the last 8 years. It's a different place. I think it's just after the, I don't know, not to get too political, but I think there's some policy that the Liberal government like picked up on or implemented that were not best for the country in a way that we were not attracting the best talent. That's what we should do, because we want immigrants, but we want people to be very talented that come to this country, right? Because we don't want to add on more people and just, they're just driving Uber or whatever for work. We have a lot of Canadians already that can do that work. So we need skilled labor. But I think some policies that were implemented were not right. And I've seen a dramatic shift in the last 8 years.
I had a client that I was out with. Sorry for interrupting, Darryl. Just a quick note, anecdotal, not coming from me personally, but it was an Indian client. And they said, you know what Canada has too much of these days, TK? Indians. And I said, what? I said, what do you mean?
Shocking.
And they said, everywhere we go, they said, we're driving 3 hours up north and there's more Indians. And I said, but you guys also came here. And because they had come here, I think maybe 5 to 10 years ago, roughly, right? This is the Canadian dream. Do you know what the Irish said back in the 1950s when we got here? There's too many Irish. What's going on? Why are they letting in all those people, right? And so it's just part of the Canadian culture, right? Is that there is a mass amount of immigration coming from one country. Chinese was 10 years ago. It seems to be India now. At one point, it was the Italians,
Philippines,
the Eastern Europeans, the Philippines. It's just the way how Canada was built. And so the government doesn't know any other way. They don't know how to build our economy in any other way. We are effectively warehousing people in Canada. That is what we do. And we just don't have enough concentration of other businesses to put our efforts into.
I think the main difference now that we have is that in the past, although there was high levels of immigration and they were definitely focused on one country at a time, it seems, or at least one kind of geographic region at a time, it might seem. But we were able to meet the demand for housing back then, and there were either there was policy in place that allowed it to happen, or for whatever reason, things worked at that point in time financially in order to incentivize the people that need to build the stuff so that there isn't the kind of environment that we're in right now. And so when you have a cup and you fill it with water, there's only so much water that's going to fit in that cup before it starts spilling over. And TK, we've talked about it so many times. 3 years ago, we were afraid of the idea of 400,000 people coming in the next year when they announced it. And then very quickly, they announced it's actually going to be 425, and everybody was crazy. And it turned into 1.2 million. And then it turned into like 2 million over 2 years. And so what we have right now is a cup that's not only overflowing, but it's like the tap is still going full steam ahead, even though we turn it a little bit down for the immigrants coming for education. Now it's so overflowing that nothing here in the country can handle it, and that's a very weird place to kind of raise a family or start your life or career, I think.
Navraj, have you seen an increase to the, like in your living standards? What were the, amount of people that were living, in one apartment? Or like, have you seen that increase just like through your own circles, where before, your friends maybe were like, hey, let's get a roommate on a 2-bedroom, but now it's like, hey, let's have 3 people in a 2-bedroom, or, those type of things. Have you seen that?
I personally haven't, because I work in like a sector which pays decently, so people like to, maintain their living standard. Like housing is the first thing that they prioritize. I feel like people usually prioritize housing. I also do the same. So for me, I personally haven't seen that shift yet, but I'm sure it has happened quite significant. There's significant impact on people like trying to like room up now, just to save costs because it's so expensive.
We had that issue at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. I was talking about it at the beginning of the show, and that the Chinese students were all being put in these unsafe conditions, and then they cracked down on it, and it was a big news thing, maybe 5-6 years ago. Now it's the Indian students. I'm going back now in my head. So in the late 50s and early 60s, my dad had, they had 8 brothers total, plus their parents, plus his grandmother, in a 3-bedroom house on McCowan Road with an unfinished basement. So they were all on the main floor, and they rented out the living room to another family. That's what you did.
That's what you did. My
You're trying to
grandparents too.
survive.
Yeah,
And
my
eventually they
grandparents.
were like, well, they're going to get another house. And then that brother moved out. He got married. They got their own place. They wanted their own place. And over time, they eventually spread out till they were all in their own home. This is just how it works here in Canada. I don't think it's anything new, to be honest. It seems like information seems to be released in a way that's very political these days. And so they're spreading these stories through social media and the traditional media in order to be able to just get people to be angry and fearful and maybe change their vote or figure out what's wrong. But at the end of the day, these stories are, I
No,
would
but
say, par for the course
maybe
in growing
don't
up.
you think that it has gotten harder for that to, happen in the current climate now? Like your family, for example, splitting out and moving to different houses. You think it's possible still in this day and age? Like if you start off together at the current prices and rates?
How are you affording it right now, Navrash?
I live with my family, so that's how I afford it.
But do you know what I mean? Like I get what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with you. Believe me. Yes, it seems like compared to 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, things are more difficult. But there are people doing it right now, right? And so I think that there is got to be a level of responsibility that people take. Maybe Toronto is not the city that you can afford to live in based off of your income and all these type of things. Maybe your living standards are too high. Maybe you should be living in a basement apartment. Maybe you should live in a condo with your family instead of a detached house, whatever. But, there's got to be some self responsibility. I don't agree with all this. I want it to get better. I want prices to come back. I just know I can't control any of those things. And so I look at my own situation and say, okay, could I afford to be in a bigger house? I don't live in a big house. Could I afford to be in a bigger house? I could probably pay for it. I don't know how my life would be. I probably wouldn't like it, but I'm comfortable living in a house that's within my means, that I can afford, that I know that there's never going to be an issue, paying the bills. To me, that makes me feel comfortable. There are people who choose otherwise. And so, these are all the things that I think people are very, they avoid those type of situations. That being said, something needs to change. We need more housing, guys. That's it.
Well, the gap between the wages out there, the average wages of the average house or the average shelter, is so far out of whack from history. This is what's making it harder. And then when you add the fact that like groceries are up and gasoline is up and entertainment is a ridiculous price to just go out and entertain yourself for an evening. It's $100 easy, and you didn't even do anything. If you take a Uber, you're $150 to $200 if you want to have any fun at all. And so we have all of these younger people that used to just have to come out of university, go apply for a bunch of jobs, get a job with a good firm, save up for a few years, buy a nice house, sell that house to somebody else for a profit, get another house. This seems to be much harder unless you start with a bundle of money. It's harder, but it's not impossible.
I want to ask Navraj a question. Sorry to interrupt again, Darryl.
That's like 8 strikes, TK.
I know you mentioned to me that you're in an industry that you know you've got good compensation. I'm wondering, just like through the program that you went to, through friends, through other people that you know from other places, doesn't have to be just in your community, from everywhere else. Are there a lot of other people who are experiencing the same sort of wealth or the same sort of what's the word I'm looking for, success with you know making, you know, let's say 6 figures or more, right? Like that type of stuff. Like do you have a lot of friends where you kind of look around and you say, hey, yeah, you know what, my friends are doing really well, or you know, are they, you know, working minimum wage jobs and struggling?
Yeah, me personally, all my friends are doing well. I don't know what's the reason, but I think it has to do with the education that we got, in a way. So I don't really have anybody making less than 6 figures. And I think even if you're making 6 figures in Toronto right now, you still can't afford to pay, what do you want to say, 3,000 in rent?
Right.
I agree. The life that we expected from 8 years ago, if you're making 6 figures, you're going, I'm living good. But yeah, the cost of living is going up. But incomes have, and I keep hearing people quote the average income. Well, the average income hasn't gone up. The average income, everybody that I'm talking to is making 6 figures. I'm listing a condo right now where the tenants are in there, and the husband's making 6 figures, and the wife is making like a good income. Like they have like $200K combined income. They're renting a condo for $2,200 a month. Like people are doing well out there right now. We're the wealth that's being created in this inflationary cycle, I think, is being overlooked because there are still some people struggling. But again, I bring it back to, there are going to be people who are not able to afford to live in Toronto. There's going to be people who aren't able to afford to live in the communities. I have police relatives. I have a lot of friends who are paramedics. I have like emergency services people. They're getting paid well too. They're all getting paid well. They got friends at the power plant. They're all making like $150,000 a year. You know, there's so much opportunity now where when I was graduating school, if you're going to make $100,000 a year, that was like, you made it. You were like, you know, wow, you're going to make 100 grand. Like that's a really successful job.
Didn't happen coming out of high school.
What I mean is that was your goal. Like that would have been
even coming out of college.
And then after college, and it was like, oh, you know, maybe 120, 150. Now people, when they're coming out of college, they're like, I better start 6 figures. Otherwise, you know, I haven't made it. And some of them are, especially in tech and different jobs.
Yeah, I agree. Like even if you're not making 100,000, I feel like if you're living in Toronto, if your primary job is paying you 70, 80,000 a year, I feel like you always have to have like some sort of side hustle. And people do, like they'll in the evenings to drive Uber or whatever, like just to get that extra 20, 30K so that they could be over the 6-figure mark. So I think it's very rare to see people who are making less than 6 figures. For household income, you're right. Like maybe the average is 200K now. I don't know. Looking at the house prices, it must be.
Right. And so we get caught up in these statistics that we see when they say, well, we look across Ontario and we look across Canada and all the average in Toronto. Well, sure, because we still have this huge poverty section of Toronto that brings down that average, you know, which is unfortunate. But when I talk to the clients and I talk to the people and anybody who's, you know, just had a somewhat stable life, whether they're new to Canada or not, the incomes are high. And I think that the opportunities there are, I think we have a lot of opportunities here that we don't talk about and that we need to really be, you know, thankful for, because what a place to be. In my mind, Canada is the best country to live in, nowhere near what it was before. But how many people do you know are moving back to their home country after being here for a while? Not just school.
I've heard of a few cases like people they wouldn't necessarily move back to the country. For me, like in my industry, people usually like prefer moving to the United States instead because it pays more, but the cost of living is less. So people would do that instead of moving, for example, somewhere um, back in the not non-Western world. So that's more common. But I've seen those cases. Do you guys think that now Canada also has a productivity problem? I feel like that's the biggest problem that we have
Big
currently.
time. Yeah, and
Um,
this is what I was going to say is that everybody that comes wants a particular lifestyle and they have an image of a particular lifestyle. But most of the people that want the lifestyle don't really understand what it takes to have the lifestyle. They just see a bunch of people online that are either, you know what, congratulations, you did very well. You have the lifestyle and you're willing to share it with us. Or it could be, you know, your parents did very well and you have nothing to do but record your lifestyle for us to all be jealous of, right? Or, you know, it could just be that they're completely faking it. And we have no idea, but what we do know is that we want it. And most people want that lifestyle. But it takes somebody at some point has to work so hard and suffer so badly and bleed and cry and sweat so much in order to be able to really present that to the world for real, that we have this problem because we have a productivity issue because everybody's lazy, everybody is fantasizing and they're stuck on TikTok all day watching the lifestyles, and people aren't spending that extra time. You can call it a side hustle, or you could call it building a business on the side until it can become your full-time business, right? And so people with certain mentalities can do really well in this environment because you can go out there and have 8 side hustles, all of which take less time than one full-time job, right? But people aren't educated on how this kind of new reality works. They just kind of pump through the same system as everybody was 8 years ago and 20 years ago. And the reality is that the world does not work like this anymore. And you can make so much money and live really comfortably in Toronto, but you're not going to do it by just being a TikToker. You're not going to do it by just being a YouTuber. The YouTubers with success were successful before they were YouTubers for the most part, or they did it so long ago that they had 15 years, 12 years to figure out how to make money at it, right? People just see, oh my God, it happened overnight. That guy's a billionaire now. That guy's a multimillionaire now. But it takes so much effort, and people are not willing to even work at Tim Hortons anymore, right? Like I was at twice. I was at Home Depot this week. Sorry, and then I'll shut up. But I was at Home Depot twice this week, and I was doing like the pickup service where you just pull in, say I'm here, and somebody brings your stuff. And I have a bad back, and I'm old, and I went to go pick up tiles, and twice some young woman was lifting these heavy tiles into my car. And she was not from here, and she was probably in school doing this part-time. But this is what's going on, is that the person who's willing to accept the least amount of money to do the worst job is getting the job every time right now for the corporations to keep their profit margins. And we have all of these abused people that are under experienced or underqualified working all over the place in everything right now, whether it's restaurant service, whether it's real estate, whether it's mortgage brokerage, or whether it's lifting tiles into a car at Home Depot. It's a big mess. But this is the problem. This is why people get those jobs, because other people are too lazy to go for them. Right?
So now, Roger, I think what you mean is the productivity as in like per capita, as far as the average person that we're bringing in. That's one side of it. So if we're bringing in a bunch of people who are living off the government, then obviously per capita it's going down. But then also the people who were working before used to love to be doing overtime and to be willing to, you know, put more effort into their businesses. And now everyone, because of the cost of living and it's hard to get away, and taxes, they're kind of just like, hey, listen, I'm not going to do any more than I need to. Teachers are the best example. My mom's a retired teacher, love teachers, grew up my whole life with that sort of compassionate side towards them. But like, I'm looking what's going on with my kid's school, and I'm like, these teachers aren't doing a single thing more than what they were paid to do. And before it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I feel like it's both of those factors, like people coming in and as well as people who were already in Canada before. I feel like their productivity level has also gone down. I feel like it has something to do with the cheap debt that the government kept on giving people. And there's no incentive, right, to make more money. For example, if you're in Ontario, if you're making 240,000, now if you want to make another dollar more, you're giving away 60 cents on the dollar, right? So why would you really want to try to increase your income that way? Wouldn't you try to find other ways, or you at that point you'd probably be like, yeah, I don't need to make more money. So like obviously taxes are a factor, like you said, TK. I feel like we need to incentivize people to work, to be more productive, and I feel like housing costs have brought that productivity down for people. People just thought like housing is this one asset class. You just buy once and it just keeps going up. So buy now and then in retirement in 20 years, I would be a billionaire at the current rate. Then I'll just live a happy life.
You're not going to do it with your job. Like all the people I know, their wealth, very few people that came from business income. When we see the upper echelon, when they did that study, they could show like, the people who own these, major companies and they have shares in them. Yeah, well, you're going to be a billionaire. But if you're just looking at the guys who are 5 to 10 to $20 million, that's like 90% real estate. So why would you want to be more productive in your business? And I'm guilty of this too, even though my business is real estate related. It's not my real estate investment side. Like those are two different things completely, but I know I'm not going to get rich off of selling houses. It's about, taking the money and putting it into real estate and trying to invest more. And so somebody who's a engineer, let's say, and who's making that 200 grand, they can say, well, should I really hustle to do more engineering, or should I spend that extra, 10 hours a week on my real estate side hustle and, take advantage of the markets? Right? Which again, just creates housing for people and that it stimulates the economy in a way, but it takes away from overall productivity and innovation. Right?
Yeah, but we also need to incentivize people to make more startups in Canada, right? We need more business. We have natural resources in Canada, but for example, the tech sector could be huge in Canada, but the government doesn't incentivize that. We need to lower taxes on like people innovating, so we also create more jobs. But that's not happening right now with the current policies or whatnot. But something has to change. Obviously, like we can't rely on housing because housing, there's only going to be limited supply, like always. Like we're never going to be happy with the amount of houses we build out, right?
I think part of the issue is also that people want to rely too much on the government to incentivize them to do stuff. So for example, like you're saying, tech startups, in my personal experience, it doesn't take the government to incentivize me to try a new tech startup. It takes my creativity, imagination, will, and desire and passion to start a new tech startup. And then the rest just kind of will happen based on my abilities and the people I surround myself with. But Canada's incentive program has nothing to do with the birth of that idea and the willingness and the desire to go for it and turn it into a reality. So maybe we also have people that are living in a delusion, that think that they want something and think that they can achieve something, but in reality just don't want to do what it takes in order to do it. Because if you had an idea for a tech startup, now's the easiest time to actually do it, because you could get ChatGPT to code the whole damn thing for you and probably end up with a decent product. And there's all kinds of really inexpensive things that could be done out there with inexpensive labor all around the world. So it'd be nice to be incentivized, because that would, maybe push more people to do it, but it would push people that are doing it maybe not because they had a great idea, more because they figured out how to get to that money.
But so there's another factor to that I feel like we need to look at is if you had that innovation or that idea, would you rather do it in Canada with the current policies that you have, or would you rather go south of the border
Great question.
where you'll get better capital, where you get better tax incentives and do it? I feel like people will always go wherever it's more preferable, right? Or it makes more sense. And same goes for like people who are not Canadians, right? We want Canada is built on immigration, right? We want to bring in more immigrants, but we want to bring in more talent and more opportunities and these innovations. So we want to bring people from outside Canada, come into Canada, start investing in these startups. So we don't really necessarily need Canadians to innovate. We need other people who are innovators in China, in India, in Europe, wherever, to come to Canada and start those startups, create those jobs, and get the cycle going. I feel like that's the other factor that kind of gets overlooked. But I do agree, like we need people to do it first. But it'll take time. Like Canadians getting that idea that they should innovate. I don't think it's a quick process.
And to your point, Navraj, is the investment capital isn't here, because the venture capitalists and everybody who is investing in startups are distracted over here because of real estate.
They're investing in real estate
They're investing
startups.
in real estate. They're doing real estate prop tech companies, right? And so this is the issue. And so when you do have a good idea and you have a great opportunity for something, and let's just face it, like most startups fail. So it means we need to have 100 startups in order to have like one good one. And so if we're only investing in 10% of the startups, we have 10% of the good ones actually make it through, right? And that's the whole theory behind innovation and why real estate has stalled the innovation here in Canada over the last 20 years.
I think Shopify, for example, I'm sure you both have heard of Shopify. It's a great success story in Canada. We need more companies like that. But why is Shopify the only one? Like there's so many, there's so many tech companies. BlackBerry was in Canada, in Waterloo. They started
That's why.
But now they're dead.
That's why.
Right.
Nortel, wasn't that a big one too?
Yeah.
Anyways.
What my point is, like, we don't necessarily need Canadians to do all the job. We need people to look at Canada in a way that it's great for doing whatever they want to do inside of Canada.
See, if we would have got Shohei Ohtani, it would have changed everything, because then we could have really showed the world we can attract talent. But that was another ding in the coffin. Sir, it was a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. And thank you so much for being so brave to come on this very serious and informative show, the Canadian Real Estate Show.
Say one thing, Navraj. We're pulling people from the comments. You're getting emails left, right, and center. But today's talk, this is top of the list here. Top of the list. You represented the viewing public very well today, so we appreciate you and your time.
Thank you so much. Next time, tell me about the suit, so I'll wear one too.
Absolutely. We'll check in with you again soon. Thank you so much, sir.
Bye.
Appreciate your time. TK, back to just the two of us.
What a show. What a show.
What an exciting, fast-paced. I think there was some humorous moments sprinkled in there as well.
Full of excitement,
very entertaining.
Witty responses. We really might have something here, Darryl.
I must say,
there really might be a show here for us to work off of,
Surprisingly, TK, you were far worse at not cutting people off than I was today. If we go back and we count, we'll see. See? You're horrible at this.
Today.
And everybody, Jesus, TK. Everybody thinks it's me, but it's really you. You're the bad guy. You're the guy who cuts everybody off. I try and save them generally from you cutting them off. You just have to talk all day.
I instigate you cutting me off. That's
because he talks so goddamn much.
It's because of the clothes that I was wearing. The reason that you want to cut me off.
You see?
Why. Yeah.
Well, we proved it to the world, TK. We can be pretty damn serious, and I must say, pretty damn sexy.
Pretty professional
at the same time.
Pretty awesome. So we're
Thanks
we're on a roll.
Thanks for joining us on the Lex Friedman podcast.
And we'll see you next time at the same time, same channel, same YouTube stream.
Live.
Will it be the same content?
You'll
have to tune in to find out.
Let us know what you think.